I fell in love with the art form.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're around kids, there are opportunities where if you don't give them something to do, they will find something to do on their own.
Yes.
I think of it as harnessing their energy.
Right.
And so there were several occasions that I had several children whose energy I needed to harness. So I repeated a story I had recently heard at one of these storytelling events. And that worked out really well. We all had fun. And then I guess the next thing was I got a book.
Oh.
It was published by NAPS, the National Association for the Perpetuation and Propagation of Storytelling, now known as the National Storytelling Network, much easier to remember. But it was Stories Told at the National Storytelling Festival.
Jonesboro.
Mm-hmm. That's been going on for 40 years. And there was a story by Donald Davis, one of the best tellers of personal stories in the country, about his aunt, his great aunt, actually. And I had suffered some losses, even though I was only in my 40s by then. Both of my parents had died the previous decade, and my best friend had been killed in an automobile accident when I was 43. So I was missing them, and when I read that story that Donald Davis had written about his great aunt, I thought, I could write stories about my loved ones who aren't here anymore as a way of still connecting with them, as a way of remembering them, and with my parents as a way to have my son know them, because he was born after my father died, and he was only 2 when my mother died. So he really has no personal memories of either of my parents.
So the stories become really archive for him, living archive, if you will.
And during my friend's memorial service, that was the first time I knew I had to speak. She was my best friend, and dang it, I wanted to proclaim that she was my best friend. So I wrote this speech out. I double typed it. I went over it. I found when my voice got quivery, I had to take a deep breath. And because public speaking was not something I enjoyed at all, that I did it when I had to do it, period.
Yep.
But this, I wanted to. And so there were all these things that were building in me. And then I had another opportunity where storytelling with children were involved. My son went to an overnight at Camp Chinjacook with his 4th grade class. And he's our only child, so both of us, my husband and I, signed up to be chaperones, to join with him. And even though we were both working, we wanted to be part of his life. So I was assigned to one of the girls' cabins. And when we first got there at lunch, it was announced that each cabin that night could do something, perform in front of the whole group. And so we were sitting around our lunch table, and the other chaperone and I asked the girls, do you have any idea of what we could do? And nobody had any ideas. And so I said, well, I know a story, an old Iroquois story of why Bear has a stubby tail. And in it, Bear runs into a number of animals in the forest. So each of you could be one of those animals. And I can come up to you, and when I get close, I'll say, and now, Bear ran into, and you can whisper to me what animal you are. And we'll have a little talk, and Bear will be very proud of his tail and say not nice things about your tail. And they all said, oh yeah, that sounds like fun. And that was the end of our rehearsal. Okay.
Well, it was like getting ready for this TV show.
Right. Thorough preparation. Okay. And then I went, oh my goodness, what have I gotten myself into? Because there were 100 4th graders. There were like 40 chaperones, so my peers, and 20 camp counselors. So this wasn't, a handful of kids, which is what I had been doing it for. It was a whole bunch of people, a lot of adults, but I went forward because I was committed. And it worked wonderfully. I started out exactly mimicking the teller, which is not generally recommended. And this is not a story, most Iroquois stories are not told during the growing period. So I'll just start it out in their tradition. Long, long ago, when animals could still speak. And I did that, and I paused. And in this big room with, 160 people? There was silence. It was magical. And I didn't take it as I was magical, but that the story was magical, that the experience was magical. And it worked. One girl kind of froze up, so then I asked her questions she could just answer in yes or no. And afterwards, people said, "Oh, that was wonderful. How did you do that? How long did you rehearse and all that?" And I said, "Well, we just kind of did it.
We did it over lunch.
Yeah,
kind of.
yeah, literally." And that night in my bunk bed, I got the shakes.
Oh.
It was after the adrenaline had worn off, and I went, I have got to pursue this. I have no idea what certified geek me is going to do with this, but I know for sure that if I don't do this, I will regret it the rest of my life.
So after you recovered, you had this epiphany.
Yes.
See, it's getting to be quite a story.
Yes. Badoomf. And then I asked Lois Hodges, whom I knew as a recorder player, but I also knew she was a librarian, a children's librarian at Schenectady, the main branch of Schenectady Public Library. I knew she was a storyteller. I said, well, I'd like to learn more. And she said, oh, you just missed Janine Laverty's fall workshop. But she gives one in the spring at the Schenectady Public Library, at the Saratoga Public Library. So you should sign up for that. And I did. And then I took many weekend workshops with Janine and started going to storytelling conferences.
Well, there you go.
And I am a certified geek, but storytelling is my vocation.